Thank you for using your voice. Appreciate you. Just a correction, and it is a correction. We made it last week. We just didn't update the slides yet, but Trunk or Treat will be on October 18th. All right, not on the 11th, but on the 18th. All right, just want to let you know, also don't want to brag, but I am going to brag. This week, I was A1 for pickup. Thank you. Okay, A1 means I was the first car to pick up my son from sons. Now they're sons. Pick up from their car line. I won't tell you which one, but it has been one of his wishes. He's been like, Dad, can you please just be A1 one time? And I had to wait an hour and 10 minutes to be A1, but I was A1. And as soon as he got in, he was beaming, man, and I said, hey, Merry Christmas. And he's like, what? I was like, Merry Christmas. What does that have to do with this? Nothing. I just wanted to tell you about that, all right? Hey, we're in week 4, and we're in week 4 as we just journey through the book of Luke. And I said in week 1 that the main idea for the entire series, if we can frame it out, if we can compile it together, is this, that the entire gospel and the book of Luke is to do what Jesus did for the reasons he did them. That we want to be a people. Track with me, you ready? As we walk through the gospel of Luke, and even I'm going to suggest to you what Jesus is preaching to his people is, at the end, to do what he did for the reasons he did them. You and I can do a lot of good stuff, but with the wrong motive. To do what he did for the reasons he did them. And I would further suggest to you that is and might be a good definition of a disciple, to do what he did for the reasons he did them. Now, to catch you up or to fill you in, here are just the last few weeks, the big ideas that we've been walking through. Thank you. Where we've been, week 1, you're called to be hope carriers in your community, not by sheer will, but by the presence of the Holy Spirit. Week 2, don't take shortcuts. Remember that? Enter God in your wilderness. Meet him there. We talked about that. Week 3 last week. Jesus comforts the broken and confronts the comfortable. And quite often, it's simultaneously inside at the same time. We need the comfort of Jesus, but we also need to be comforted. We need to be comforted by Jesus, but also need to have our comforts be unsettled. All right? And today what I want to do is, I just want to downshift a little bit. I don't know how your week is going. I don't know how your season of life is going. But I just want to breathe a little and make some room to slow down as we process gospel rest. What does rest look like? How did Jesus define rest? Because even as we've been going through week 1, week 2, week 3, it's like, hey, you're going to be hope carriers. Don't take shortcuts. Encounter God in your wilderness, right? Yes, he's going to comfort you, but also be uncomfortable. But even as you read through the book of Luke, where we end up right now in Luke chapter 6, and you can meet me there in Luke chapter 6, verses 1 to 11, we see that Jesus begins to give us a vision for what it looks like to have gospel rest. All right? Can we do this? Let's just do this. We're physical beings. God gave us bodies. Take a deep breath in. Hopefully you brush your teeth, all right? Or just look forward, all right? And breathe it out. Gospel rest. Luke chapter 6, starting in verse 1, and here is part 1 of the big idea or principle that we're working through, is that gospel rest recenters my identity. Gospel rest, resting in Jesus, recenters, reorients my identity. All right? Luke chapter 6, starting in verse 1. On one Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and his disciples began to pick some heads of grain and rub them in their hands and eat the kernels. Verse 2. Some of the Pharisees, they asked, why are you doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath? We'll pause there. Hey, one of the first questions we have to ask is, what is the Sabbath? What is the Sabbath, right? And what I want you to recognize is that in the very second chapter of the entire Bible, God took a Sabbath. He took a rest, right? Now, for the sake of the morning, I want to suggest to you that the Pharisees, which we'll see soon, they understand the practice of Sabbath, but they don't understand the deeper principle or point of the Sabbath. One more time. Are you ready? I know for some of you it's been a long morning, all right, and I'm there with you, all right? I suggest to you that the Pharisees, which we'll see soon, they understand the practice of the Sabbath, the letter of the law, but they don't understand the deeper principle or point of the Sabbath. The practice is simply this: it's a 24-hour period of rest, rooted in God's own rhythm and work and rest. And now the principle we'll unpack as we go. But I wonder if you knew, depending on the church background that you come from, or church culture, or maybe you're unchurched, and that's great too. We're glad you're here. In Exodus chapter 20, which I have right here, in Exodus chapter 20, starting in verse 8 to 10, this is how the Sabbath is defined. God gives Moses the 10 commandments and says, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all of your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. Again, we see that word. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your town. Right? I know that Europe is moving towards a 4-day work week, which I love, right? We're just trying to be ultra Sabbath folk, okay? That's awesome. I think, hey, I have no issues with that, as long as you're doing your work. But, hey, the Pharisees in Luke chapter 6, they take Sabbath so seriously. In Exodus chapter 16, which you can mark down in your notes if you want, but in Exodus chapter 16, verse 29, they took the Sabbath so seriously, there's a clause that says you cannot travel on the Sabbath. So imagine with me, all right? These Pharisees, these Sadducees, they're sitting around, they're saying, okay, it says we can't travel on the Sabbath, but what does that actually mean? Because God didn't qualify it for us very specifically. So they sat around and they said, 5 yards, 10 yards, 100 yards. And they got to the agreement that it must mean 1,000 yards. Okay? On the Sabbath, you can't walk more than 1,000 yards. But there's stipulations, right? What if the food kernel that you're trying to eat is on the 1,001st yard? What are you going to do? So there's a clause, because they want to keep the practice of the Sabbath. They're dedicating to the law, the ceremonial law. They want to follow it so closely. And they said, well, if there's food, and it's related to food, the food is an extension of the house, so we can travel that extra yard to get the food. Here's another example. They just want to get it right. Their motive, we'll see, but they just want to get it right. On the Sabbath, you're not allowed to... let me get it right. They're not allowed to wash the floors, all right? And so most of these guys, they wouldn't take baths on the Sabbath. Now, you might be thinking, what does that have to do with washing the floors, all right? And don't tell your kids about this, okay? But they basically thought, what if we take a bath and the water drips, and the water drips on the floor? Is that washing the floor? We can't take a bath. They took it really, really seriously. They wanted to figure out, how do we keep this Sabbath rule? So if you take a look at Luke chapter 6, go back to Luke chapter 6, the disciples here are in a quadruple violation, all right? They walk beyond the 1,000 yards, then they harvest, then they thresh, and then they pick grain on the Sabbath. Here's my question for you. How do the Pharisees know what the disciples are doing? Do you think they traveled like 1,000 yards and they just kind of stand on the edge, right? And then they rolled up 2 flatbreads and some binoculars and they're like looking, you know? How did they know how far and what the disciples are actually doing? We don't know. But I think that's part of the humor of the text. But here, the Pharisees are looking at these disciples and they say, you're breaking the law, the ceremonial law, the rule. I think we have the slide here. Here's a quote from old Pharisaic writing, but this is what they said, that the rules about the Sabbath are so burdensome, they're so heavy, they're so collectively overweighing that it is like a mountain hanging by the hair. This whole idea that you have a hair and you're trying to hold a mountain, and that's how the Sabbath pressure and ceremonial law and that burden felt like on them. The rules about the Sabbath are as mountains hanging by the hair. But how is this related to rest and finding Sabbath rest? And I want you to come back and connect with me, all right? Don't miss this point. Because for the Pharisee in Luke 6, you ready? And then I'll connect it back to maybe something you're working through. The way that they achieved rest, the place where they felt the blessings of the good life, where they feel like my life has meaning, significance, security, is by being a morally good person, by keeping the Sabbath practice. One more time. They believed that by living according to the most stringent rules, they were securing a meaningful life. They might even exceed it because I'm the kind of person that God must surely approve of. In other words, they found their rest, not in their own not in God, but in their own moral performance of keeping a 24-hour period. They took a good thing, they made it an ultimate thing, which ultimately became an idol in their lives. All right. Obviously, it goes without saying, I'm a pastor, and it's probably not a good thing to admit this thing I'm about to, but we're trying to create a culture of vulnerability. All right, so let me just share with you. As a pastor, I want to live ethically, but I really don't care about rules that I consider to be arbitrary. All right? One more time. I want to live an ethical life, but if it's a rule that I feel like is arbitrary, I don't really want to, So, for example, I don't even have any dogs, but I see this rule all the time, and I'm like, I would totally break this rule. If I went to the dog park and, it said, keep your dog on a leash, and there's no dogs around, and there's nobody else around, I'm going to let my dog go. You know what I mean? I think that rule is pretty arbitrary. And so when I look at Luke 6, I see this Pharisee who just wants to live a morally good life, following all the rules, because that's where security and significance and meaning of life comes from. I'm like, I don't know if I really relate to that, right? If I'm coming back somewhere, at midnight, probably a prayer meeting, because I'm a pastor, right? Yeah, you come back from a prayer meeting. All right, don't laugh with me. That's fine. All right, and there's a crosswalk. I'm not the guy who's going to walk 20 yards, man, to walk on the sidewalk or the crosswalk. I'm just going to look both ways, and I'm going to cross, And if that's disappointing to you, I'm really sorry. You can pray for me, okay? But I really, even as I look at Luke 6, right, I mean, the moral law, again, I want to live ethically, but rules, if they're arbitrary, I feel like they're arbitrary, and I'll follow them if I want to, really doesn't give me that same type of oomph or weight. But, for those of you who do live by a moral standard, whether internally or externally, something that's placed on you or you place on yourself, tell me, isn't it true? When you live by those types of standards, it always feels like you never measure up correctly. It always feels like, whether by external or internal standards, that mistake that you made is like this mountain hanging by a hair in your life. For others of us, though, it's not moral law and following the rules are not the common identity sources that you might have, but maybe these are some of the places that you give your life meaning or significance and security. All right, and I'll go first. This is where I place it. Maybe it's your career and your success. Maybe you define yourself by your work, your achievements, your grades, or maybe your status. And how do you know if your career or success is the place you try to find rest in? Because, catch it, are you ready? If you're successful, it goes to your head. But it's always never enough. You're always hungry for more. And if the thing fails, it goes to your heart. It's not just disappointing, it's devastating and it's exhausting. Because you're just trying to find rest by achieving the thing that is most important to you. And maybe it's even trying to have your kids flourish. It's a good thing that we might make it ultimate thing that becomes an idol. Maybe for you, it's not career success or keeping your dog on the leash, but maybe it's relationships and approval. You build your ultimate identity around trying to find rest by being loved or accepted or respected by others. Again, these are good things, right? But we make it the ultimate thing. Romantic partners, friends, families, peers. And how do you know if relationships and approval is the place that you are trying to find rest? You ready? If you find yourself a people pleaser, when you become overly dependent and anxious, where you feel like you can never do enough, and you are always out to prove your worth, or you find yourself consistently disappointed in people because no one can fulfill that standard, however perfect they are. Here's the last example. Maybe for you, it's personal freedom and autonomy, especially in the modern Western culture. Right, we seek security and rest in self-expression and independence. If I could just express and be myself. But here's the problem. The self is always changing, and this always leads to insecurity and exhaustion because you feel like you never can get there. There's a guy named Tim Keller. He used to pastor in New York City. Here's a quote from him. I think it's really helpful. Each one of us, we have our shrines. You might not have a physical shrine, but we have our shrines. Whether office towers, our careers, spas or gyms, what others think of us, what we think of ourselves, how we look, studios or stadiums, where sacrifices must be made in order to procure the blessings of what we think is a good life and ward off the disaster. An idol is whatever you look at and say in your heart of hearts, if I have that, if I can just have that, then I'll feel my life has meaning, significance, and security. Link back to Luke chapter 6. You might be sitting there and feeling tempted to say, hey, I'm not like the Pharisee, where I make moral performance my place of rest and identity. I am good. And I think the Holy Spirit would say to you and to me, yeah, but you have. And this is what I love about the Scripture. You ready? That's why there's so many different characters in the Scripture, right? It's not just one person over and over again. I think he would say to us, that's why you have a Zacchaeus issue, where your desire for success defines your worth. Let's work through that. Is that really where you're going to find rest? You have an Ananias and Sapphira issue where it's not morality, but it is your desire for wealth, and that owns you. And if you think, if I could just get that thing right, I'm going to get the rest that I need. Or maybe you have a Good Samaritan issue where you would never say it publicly, but you feel like some people are beneath you, and your identity is marked by comparing yourself to other people. Maybe it's a woman at the well issue, trying to find value and security in your life by who loves you and your relationship status. And to that, go to Luke chapter 6, starting in verse 3 and 4. Jesus recenters the Pharisees' identity and the place of rest. All right, one more time. Starting in Luke chapter 6, verse 3, Jesus recenters the Pharisees' identity and place of rest as he will for us. Take a look at verse 3. Jesus answered them, have you never read? Literally, it's like, surely you've read this, right? You're a Pharisee. Like, you've never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry. This is like if you go into your physics 101 class and you say to your physics prof, you've really never heard of Einstein before? Yeah? I think he'd be kind of offended, or she'd be offended. He's like, have you really never heard about David before? Remember this thing? Verse 4, he entered the house of God, and taking the consecrated bread, David, he ate what is lawful only for priests to eat, and he also gave some to his companions. Now, this is, pause there, a reference to 1 Samuel chapter 21. And I know the way that Jesus phrases it, it just almost sounds casual, right? David just wandering in. He gets a little get-together with his buddies, and he has a temple DoorDash, right? And he just gets some food, and he just eats it, and it's over. But this consecrated bread, all right? Say it with me. Is it lechem panim? Come on, say it with me. Lechem panim. Wow, that's pretty good. All right? Literally means the bread of face, or the bread of presence. And what this bread was that lechem panim was interchanged every week at the temple. Only the priests could procure, prepare, and take it away and also eat it. And they just couldn't eat it on the steps of the temple, right? They're like, hey, we got some lechem panim. You guys want some? Just going to eat it. No. They had to take the lechem panim, go to a really holy place that was designated, and then only the priest could dispose and eat of it. You following? And this face of bread is actually, you know why there's 12? It's 12 because it's a representative of the 12 tribes. And what they're doing is they make this bread, they put it into the temple in the holy place, and they bring it before God. And these 12 loaves are a symbol of the 12 tribes of Israel, and them being before God and God's faithfulness procuring and coming upon those 12 tribes. But in this passage, Jesus says, don't you know David, he was running away from Saul with his men. And he entered into the temple. And then he went into the temple. He got that bread. And the priest gave it to him, and he ate it, he said. By the way, it was on the Sabbath, too. This is the point that Jesus is making, right? He's saying in verse 3, take a look at verse 3. You've read that story where David and his men go. But this is the point that he's making. The point that he's making is, when you look at 1 Samuel chapter 21, there is no hint, catch it, there is no hint through the entire text or from the priest or from Jesus in Luke 6 that what David did was seen as wrong, sinful, or condemned. See, what he's asking the Pharisees is, are you ready? Let me see your eyes. Ready? Let's make the connection. What he's saying is, if David, who walked into the temple and took this bread on the Sabbath that was holy, and he ate it, and the entire Old Testament that you follow said it was not sinful, that it was okay, then do you really want to say that my disciples who eat not consecrated bread, but just any old bread, it's just grain, right, just laying around on the Sabbath, is also wrong? Are you going to tell me that the Old Testament is actually wrong? He's challenging where they are trying to procure their rest. He's saying that the practice, you ready, of the law was never intended to be interpreted so literally that compassion was excluded in a situation of basic needs. One more time, ready? That human needs supersede ceremonial laws because the law was always meant to serve God's people and not enslave them. Here's a scholar. His name is Darrell Bach. He's a New Testament scholar, really respected. And this is what he says about this passage in Luke chapter 6. He said, the Sabbath laws are not meant to be a master over God's people, but a service to them. They were not created as a burden against them, not a burden against them. He's trying to reshape and recenter their identity. He's saying, look, man, you are trying so hard. And can you do this for me real quick this morning? Can you center yourself in the shoes of the Pharisees and ask yourself the question? The Pharisees are trying to find their rest through morality, through doing the right thing, by following the rules. What are you trying to find your rest in? What is the thing in your heart of hearts, to borrow that phrase, where you find yourself on a Wednesday morning when Tuesday was rough? You say, man, if I could only have this thing, that happened. And it might be good things, good relationships, good places, good ideas that we make ultimate things, he says. Take a look at Luke chapter 6, verse 5, and here's the clincher of what Jesus says. Then Jesus said to them, the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath, right? He says, the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. All right, this is one of my new fun phrases, and you're going to hear me say it just like Ian says Brian. I'm going to say this, all right, over and over again. We're going to get nerdy together, okay? Just give me a minute, okay? Nerdy together. Here we go. Take a look at Luke chapter 6, verse 5. When you see that word the there, right, the article coupled with the noun makes this a title. Okay? It's not an indefinite description, it's a title, right? So he's not saying a son of man, but he's saying the Son of Man. It's like if I said, hey, I'm a singer, I might be saying I am a singer of many, right? I'm just a singer who sings on Monday at karaoke and nobody wants to listen to me. I am a singer, but if I say I am the singer, then that would be what the Rolling Stone magazine in 2023 had the top 200 singers of all times. You know who's at the top? No, I'm kidding. Aretha Franklin, all right? She's the bomb, man. And Rolling Stone agrees with me, all right? So don't fight me on it, okay? But he is saying, I'm not just a Son of Man. He's saying, I'm Aretha. I'm the. I can't even say her name. I'm the. You know what I mean? I'm the Son of Man. So it's a article coupled with a noun that makes it a title. But take a look at the next word. The next word is. I know you're like, is. That's just like a throwaway word, right? But is a present tense, third singular indicative, which means it's a present, ongoing identification, right? It's not merely a future role. He's saying I'm the Son, right? I'm the best. I'm the one with authority. Is means present, right now. Is the Son. Okay, here you go. The Son of Man is what? Ongoing identification, not merely a future role, right? Is Lord. What is he? He is the Son of Man who is present, the what? Lord, master, owner, one with authority. Where in the Greek translation of the Old Testament, this word Lord often functions where Hebrew uses Yahweh. You tracking with me? Come on, come with me on this trail of Greek and whatever you think this is, all right? Look. He says to the Pharisees, this is what we're trying to build up to, right? He's saying to the Pharisees, look, you're trying to find your Sabbath rest in morality and trying to do what's right. Guess who's standing right in front of you? the Son of Man, who is present, who is what? The Lord, Master, authority, the one who can actually give you the rest that you're looking for. I am the Son of Man, the Lord of the what? Sabbath, he says. The rest that you're looking for. And sometimes we read the scripture, right? And we're like, all right, cool, Luke chapter 6, verse 5, the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath. But man, this is what he's been working towards. He's saying, don't you know about David? I am the Lord of the Sabbath. What I want to do here as we think about Jesus and finding our rest in Jesus is, what does this actually practically look like, though, okay? And I think there are at least two parts here. So Sabbath rest, yes, is a theological truth to be learned, but it's also a truth to be practiced. You tracking with me? Right? So how do we, and I hope this is the question that you're asking yourself, how do we disengage from the things that we make our rest? How do we do that? So how do we set aside our dreams, our ambitions, our desires, that thing that we want so badly? How do we set that aside and surrender to God so that that's not where we're trying to find gospel rest? Do we just pray harder? Do we just read the Bible more? I mean, all good things, right? Like, what do we do? And if you follow just the life of Jesus throughout the Gospels, man, you know what we see over and over again? All right, and then I'm going to show you a little bit of a practice that you can do, but you see him going into the wilderness, and then he's fasting, he's praying. Early in the morning, he goes into a solitary place where he communes with God. He withdraws often to lonely places to pray. We see that all the time throughout the scripture. He withdraws after John the Baptist's death. He prays on a mountain after feeding 5,000, right? He's trying to set up a framework of consistently being in an opportunity for Sabbath rest, where it's not just a principle in your head, but it's a practice in your life. Right? So what does that look like? Can we go to that? I think it's like 4 different, yeah. How do you loosen that grip, right? How do you loosen the grip of the thing that you're trying to find rest in? This is from a guy named Pete Scazzaro, and he just walks through what a Sabbath looks like, and I think these 4 elements are really helpful in being able to surrender to God, right? So stop. I know that depending on the Christian context you grew up in, you know the word Sabbath, and Sabbath for you really looks like doing chores, right? You're just not doing your regular stuff, but you're doing all the other stuff. But ceasing all work, right? Both paid and unpaid, errands, chores, housework, and trusting that God sustains the world without our constant effort. Man, can I just tell you, there's an uneasiness when you just stop everything, right? You disconnect digitally. You disconnect from busy work, even chores. But can I just tell you something? In order for you to have a moment like this, and for you, you might be able to do 24 hours. For some of you, it's going to be 4 hours. You just start where you are, right? Maybe it's 4 hours. Maybe it's just the morning time. Maybe it's just an afternoon time. Then you build up to 6, and then to 8 to 10, and you kind of get to 24. But ceasing all work really is an effort for you to trust that God sustains everything without your constant effort. But this is going to take pre-planning. Say that with me in that way, pre-planning. It's going to take pre-planning, right? You're going to have to do your chores, let's just say, on Saturday, so that on Sunday you can actually not do your chores. It's going to take some pre-planning. Rest, engaging in activities that restore your energy, such as sleep, leisurely walks, or meaningful conversations. You're disengaging, right? You're engaging with God. You're disengaging with these things so that you can actually commune with God and say, God, look, John's life is so filled with a desire of trying to find rest and succeeding in whatever he defines as success. I'm going to stop. I'm going to cease. I'm going to trust. I'm going to surrender. And I'm not going to do anything so that I can trust that you say that I am enough. I'm going to delight, enjoying God's good gift, relationships, nature, food, creativity, cultivating gratitude and joy, contemplate, spending time reflecting on God's goodness through prayer, through scripture and worship, and allowing the Sabbath to be a day of spiritual renewal, right? It's not a day where you're just on Netflix or on your phone all day, and that's the Sabbath. It's not busy work. But man, how do you stop for 4 hours in the morning, for an entire day, if you build that up, or you just sit with the Lord? Hey, how would that make you a more emotionally healthy person? How would it allow you to actually be more present in emotionally, physically, socially in situations? If instead of you feeling like you're going from one thing to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing, you build in a consistent rhythm where you could practice this. How would you be more present for your spouse, for your kids, for people at work who are really annoying? How do you do that? How would it help you to shed some of these things, even good things, that you're trying to make the ultimate thing of source of rest? And what I love here is, as we go back to Luke chapter 6, and just one application as we close, is that Jesus, who is the Lord of the Sabbath, he takes Sabbaths. You tracking? Man, if God did it, I think we should probably do it too. That's probably good for you. Probably good for me, if we did that. All right, here's the application as we close. And if you're back in Luke chapter 6, if you take a look at Luke chapter 6, 6 to 11, the primary question that was going in my mind is, why is this part of the story a part of Luke chapter 6? I just kept asking that to myself as I was looking at it this week. I don't understand why this is in here specifically. So in Luke chapter 6, verses 1 to 5, if you're tracking with me, he says, let's recenter your priorities of rest, center it on me. But then why is he talking about healing somebody on the Sabbath in Luke chapter 6, verses 6 to 11? That's the question. Why? Why is this in here? What's the purpose? Is it just a random story? This is what I'm going to suggest to you, okay? Is that gospel rest recenters my identity, ready, and releases me to serve other people. You tracking? Luke chapter 13, Jesus heals a woman on the Sabbath. Luke chapter 14 heals a man with leprosy on the Sabbath. In John chapter 5, he heals at the pool of Bethesda on the Sabbath. In John chapter 9, he heals the man born blind on the Sabbath. You tracking with me? This is not accidental. 6 to 11 exists because if you are more centered on the gospel of who he says you are, then you have the margin to be released to serve other people. It's not out of your own will. It's not because you are morally good and you're trying to do a good thing. It's not out of your own, I have to do this for the sake of serving others. But when you have rest, when you build in consistent rhythms of being away with God, communing with him, praying with him, you have the margin to see and notice people instead of life feeling like it's crushing you. Take a look at verse 6 to 11. On another Sabbath, Jesus went into the synagogue and he was teaching, and a man was there whose right hand was shriveled. The Pharisees and the teachers of the law were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal on the Sabbath. But Jesus knew what they were thinking and said to the man with the shriveled hand, "Get up and stand in front of everyone." So he got up and stood there. Jesus has the margin to notice this man. Hey, I don't know about you, but when I am not emotionally healthy and I'm just going, man, for the sake of going, it's really hard for me to notice people who are in pain, who need support, who I can love on. And the person who is annoying feels extra annoying, Then, verse 9, Jesus said to them, "I ask you, which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to destroy it?" Verse 10, he looked around at them all. Then he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He did so, and his hand was completely restored. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law were furious, began to discuss with one another what they might do to Jesus. What would your life look like if you had gospel rest, recentered your identity, and allowed it to release you to serve other people? To notice others, to have the margin, to stop, rest, delight, and contemplate. What would that do for you, for your work, for your family, for your friends? one story. I'm going to call the team forward, and then we'll be done. There's a guy named William Booth. You might know him. He is the guy, around Christmas time when you see those red kettles banging for the Salvation Army. William Booth is the founder of the Salvation Army. And so that was in the 1865 or so. He devoted his life to preaching and the poor. And the whole idea of the Salvation Army, though, was that he was trying to go after people who were excluded from traditional churches. So he really tried to serve the people in the margins, those who were poor, those who didn't have. Listen to this crazy part, okay? In 2023, current day, 2 years ago, in 2023, they served 183 million meals that year, right? 10 million nights of shelter. There were over 10,000 homeless accommodations, over 200 children's homes in 130 countries, 146 elderly homes. I mean, but the origin, if you follow William Booth's life, he wrestled with this tension of wanting to serve the least of these, but also trying to find Sabbath rest. Allowing that Sabbath rest and communion with God to be the ignition, the foundation that allowed him to, and I love this phrase, man. This is one of my life phrases, to move in the direction of long obedience. Long obedience. Not just a faith that sparks when it feels hot. Not just a faith that goes when everything is going right. But a long obedience, following God in the same direction. It's a long obedience. And Jesus says it's based on Sabbath rest. Gospel rest. Here's a quote as the team comes forward. All right, William Booth, he says this. This is how much he took it seriously. He says, for instance, I walked in my young days thousands of miles on the Sabbath. I guess the Pharisees would say you can't do that, right? But thousands of miles on the Sabbath when I could for a trifling sum have ridden at ease, rather than use any compulsory labor of man or beast for the promotion of my comfort. He didn't want to ride a cart or a carriage because he didn't want by him cause somebody else to work. Another person or an animal, right? That's how seriously he took it. I still think we ought to abstain from all unnecessary work ourselves and, as far as possible, arrange for everybody about us to have one day's rest in 7. He believed in it, man. And his legacy stands today, a long obedience in the same direction. Because he consistently understood that rest is ultimately found in Jesus. But that rest is only added to our lives as we intentionally take time to figure out how we're going to do that. Reorient it. Recenter it. Which ultimately releases me to serve other people, to notice other people. All right, I'm going to read Colossians chapter 2 for us, but I'm going to ask you to stand. Man, we're just going to sing some songs to the Lord. And the first song, it says, I just want